This Solution Showcase video is brought to you by the Job Accommodation Network. JAN. Practical Solutions, Workplace Success. 800-526-7234. Voice. 877-781-9403 TTY. AskJan.org.
You have probably seen sign language interpreters many times at public events, conferences, and on television. Sign language interpreters listen to what is being said and interpret the words spoken for sign language users. Sign language interpreters also watch what people who are deaf are signing and repeat their words aloud for communication partners to hear. In the United States, the most used form of sign language is called American Sign Language, or ASL. Did you know that sign language interpreting services can also be provided remotely? This can be helpful when an in-person or community-based interpreter cannot be found locally, or when interpreting is needed for an online meeting or training. When using Video Remote Interpreting, or VRI, the room is arranged so the person who is deaf can easily see a video screen that is connected to an interpreter via the internet. It is important that the interpreter be able to hear everyone who is participating in the meeting. The interpreter must also be able to see the person who is deaf well enough to understand what they are signing. Screen quality and placement, as well as a reliable internet connection, are very important to the success of this type of interpreting. VRI is often used in medical settings when it would take too long for an in-person or community-based interpreter to get to the setting. In some cases, VRI may also be used when an interpreter with specialized vocabulary is needed to effectively communicate about the situation. In online meetings among professionals in technical or medical fields, VRI may be the best option if a service can be found where the interpreters are familiar with industry jargon or can be briefed in advance of the meetings. People who are deaf often report that they prefer working with familiar interpreters, or at least meeting the interpreter briefly before the start of important meetings and conversations. VRI service providers are more likely than VRS service providers to be able to introduce interpreters to clients ahead of time, or provide a specific interpreter upon request. This may make VRI a good option for high-stakes interactions, such as interviews, when those conversations are handled virtually. Both community-based interpreting and VRI are services provided for a fee. In employment settings, the employer is typically responsible for paying these services. This can be confusing for employers who are used to another type of video-based interpreting service called Video Relay Services, or VRS. When using VRS, deaf and hearing individuals can communicate by telephone through a sign language interpreter by placing a video relay call. Video relay calls are made using a high-speed or broadband internet connection and a video phone connected to a TV, or through a personal computer equipped with a web camera and video relay software. With VRS, the person who uses sign language signs to a video interpreter on their monitor. The interpreter then communicates with the hearing person via a standard phone line by relaying the conversation between the two parties. People with speech impairments who communicate using sign language may also be eligible to use this service. The Federal Communications Commission, FCC, regulates and funds VRS. Due to FCC's regulations and funding, VRS can only be used when the conversation would usually involve a telephone. While VRS can be used for conference calls, it cannot be used for meetings where all the participants are in the same room. At least one participant must be in a different location. While these rules can be challenging, there is a benefit to using VRS when possible. Unlike VRI, the caller does not pay for this service. Instead, the FCC compensates VRS providers from the Interstate TRS Fund, which the FCC oversees. The FCC also regulates the confidentiality requirements with which VRS providers must comply. For information about interpreting, VRI, or VRS, visit JAN's Searchable Online Accommodation Resource, SOAR, at http://askjan.org/soar.cfm.
This Solution Showcase video was produced by the Job Accommodation Network. JAN. For questions about accommodations, call 800-526-7234. Voice. 877-781-9403 TTY. Or visit AskJan.org. JAN is funded by a contract from the Office of Disability Employment Policy, U.S. Department of Labor. hashtag 1605DC-17-C-0038. The opinions expressed herein do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of the Office of Disability Employment Policy.